When we talk about service to the community, we have many people in the 757 that are giving and dedicating their lives to just that. Today, on our Community Conversation series, we have one of the great community servants, Vice Mayor of the City of Newport News, Sandra here to join us. And then also, we have special guests, Minister Gary McCollum, former Senior Vice President for Cox Communications and former Board of Visitors, also to discuss the importance of participating in grassroots activism. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in just a minute. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're so glad that you're here to join us once again as we broadcast live like we always do. Every Sunday here on the campus of the Norfolk State University, broadcasting live from WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Look, I don't know about you, but I barely made it in this morning because it was an epic homecoming celebration here in Spartan Nation. Let me tell you, we had a phenomenal week of activities, phenomenal week of engagement of our alumni, our students, our faculty, our staff, stakeholders. We even had visits from state officials, elected officials on the state level, federal level, from a U.S. Senator, U.S. Congresspersons, also Lieutenant Governor, members of the House of Delegates. Let me tell you, it was a phenomenal weekend. Look, it's back. Welcome back to Sparta. So where it all began. Look, we got a phenomenal show for you today. We're continuing our community conversation series as we lead up to our election show, Get Out the Vote show. Next month is election time. We're voting for midterm elections, and we're voting not just on a national level, but we're also voting on a local level. We're going to learn more about that from our second guest, very special guest that we have that's going to talk about his organization, Do the Right Things, grassroots activist organization. But before that, we have with us a very good friend of mine who I call one of my sisters. And let me tell you, when we talk about community engagement, community activism, and service to the community, to me, there's none that comes to mind first than the Vice Mayor of the City of Newport News, Sandra. Dr. Cherry, welcome to Stay the Water.
Good morning, Dr. Eric Claville. How are you? Thank you for the invitation.
Wonderful. Well, look, I know that you're busy this morning, and we're thankful that you were able to carve out at least a little time to spend with us and our listeners across Hampton Roads. You know, during our community conversation series, during this series, we talk about, we've been talking with individuals from business, from athletics, sports, to academia, and also elected officials to talk about why they wanted to serve the community. And when I think about service to the community, the years that people dedicated their lives, you and I, we've talked countless hours about this over the years. We've known each other. As your service, tell us, first of all, what district do you serve in the City of Newport News, and your role as Vice Mayor?
Thank you for the question. I was elected to City Council in 2014, re-elected in 2018 to serve and represent the South District Seat B of the city. It was in 2020 that I was elected to be Vice Mayor of the City of Newport News. In that role, I represent the mayor in his absence, and it has truly been an humbling but a rewarding experience to have that role.
In that district, you're just not a councilwoman, but you're really a staple in that community, especially from the work that you and your former husband have done. Tell us a little bit about that work and why it's so important for that district.
Thank you. I came back home in 1990 and really was devastated about a lot of the devastation that I saw as far as homelessness and the conditions of our residents really in the Southeast community, because that's where I was born and raised. Just a lot feeling depression. It just didn't seem like people had hope. And I really began to get involved and find out who were the community leaders at that time, got involved with the neighborhood watch groups to try to lend a hand to try to make a difference for the things that they wanted to push forward for the Southeast community. And so I was just honored to be able to get involved. I just felt like if I just put my hands to the plow, that I could also make a difference in the community. So it actually started when I came back in 1990. And then my late husband came back in 1995. We eventually got married, but both of us were from downtown. And we wanted downtown to look much better, and we determined in ourselves that we were going to be a part of making the difference for downtown Newport News. And so that was why when the race came up, you had to live in your district. And because I lived and still continue to live in the South District, I ran for city council to make a difference, to be at the table. And sometimes people say, can you make a difference? I said, when you're at the table, you can invite other people that often are not asked to come to the table. You have that opportunity to invite stakeholders, change makers to the table to share their ideas. And so that was birthed out of that, just being home and wanting to see a difference in my community.
Wow. So almost 30 years back home, in serving your community, over 30 years back home, but almost 30 years serving your community. What changes have you seen and you've been instrumental in creating for the people of the South End District?
I tell you, we have a fantastic city manager, one who cares about all people. And I'm thankful for that because my spirit and her spirit agrees that people's lives matter. I don't care where you live in the city. We are making so much great progress. And it was her turning her head to say, you know what? They deserve quality of life as well. And so we began to work and look at what could we do to just begin to see small changes that people, would feel like something was being done. And so the first thing was streetscape improvement, which I'm very proud of that because we used to have overhead wires along Jefferson Avenue and really started when we started from 25th Street to 36th Street, and that began to birth. And then when we looked downtown, says, okay, we got to do something. And she was positive, and she moved to make sure that funds were allocated and appropriated, that we could see streetscape improvement. And so now just that visibility, people, when they look downtown from 36th Street all the way down to 12th Street, just to have the underground lines, it is fantastic, and beautiful lighting. And so we're in transformation. And I get excited because we're beginning to see a difference in our community. We have new apartments being built on 28th Street and 27th Street on the corners. It's going to be some affordable housing, but it also will be some public housing, but it'll be mixed use, mixed income that's going to be there. That in itself is transformational. And we're looking for stakeholders and other public and private partnerships to come in to make a difference and bring amenities to that community because, as I often say, I said, even though we're building, we still need to make sure that we're providing the amenities that even people that are moving forward, as we move forward, we have to make sure those things are possible. So those are two great things that I think are happening right now. And Brooks Crossing, my gosh, the Innovation and Opportunity Center, where we have workforce development and so many things that are actually in that building that are free to the community. And so those are just a few things to name. But, just the housing infrastructure, all of that is we're making a difference in our community right now.
I've been in that community. I worship in that community and been a part of that community for over a decade myself. And I've seen just the difference in just a little bit over a decade. We've talked and we've had conversations about some of the struggles to get things done, but it seemed like once the ball got rolling, it continues to move, and there are some other great things on the horizon that's there.
Right.
But tell us, about when we talked about the struggles to get the ball moving, what kept you pushing?
Because I believe in my city, and I love people, and I love my community. People's lives matter to me. And so hearing people feel like they had no hope, it was like, no, there's always hope. And so I began to tell people, speak life. you've got to speak life into your community. No matter what you see, we still have to speak life into the community. And so I knew that we had to continue to push no matter what. You know, if I have to have hope for me and hope for you, then okay, let's push together. But it was realizing that the priority had to be that we had vision, there had to be intention, and that we had to have deliverables for people to know that their lives really do matter. We wanted to change the perception that people have of downtown Newport News that, you know, if you're from that zip code, oh, nothing good's going to come out of it. I said, the devil is a lie. No, we have some great, fantastic people that have come out of the Southeast community, and so we're very proud of that.
Amen.
So I wanted to push, to make sure and be committed to stay the course, no matter what. And that's why I said when you have city government that works with the people together, great things can happen. And so we've been able to involve people in this change. The CNI grant, the Choice Neighborhood Initiative grant that we got for $30 million, housing people in neighborhoods, rebuilding the neighborhood, rebuilding community with great housing, and then having amenities for the people and let them know that we want to lift them up, right, and enable them to empower them to be self-sufficient. And so that's the push, just to let people know that we have hope. And I think when people see a change, they begin to see hope. They begin to have hope, right? And so it's just like a ball. You know, we just have to keep pushing and be committed. The whole thing, you have to show up and you have to stay the course.
That's it. Well, you know,
you have to stay the course.
Absolutely. And, you know, the work that you're doing in the Southeast End community, you just don't want to do it for that community, but you want to do it for the city. So you actually are running for mayor of the city of Newport News.
I am. Because, you know what, it's not just in the Southeast. That's because that's where I was raised, but I've had the opportunity to be a part of great things that are happening in our north part of the city. We have plans to build a new library for Grissom, plans to have a new police precinct up there. So we're doing great things. City Center is coming along with, it's continuing to develop. But I realized that I have to be, as vice mayor, is now not about just being in the South, but no, you represent the entire city. So the great things is getting out, being with people, being intentional about being with people, not just showing up for the things that, you know, city or driven, but also showing up in the lives of people, football games, basketball games, birthdays, but letting people know that I'm here. You can talk to me. I'm available. Here I am. And so I think just running for mayor is that great opportunity to let people know that your lives do matter to me in every single way. And the city is going to be better when we make ourselves available to the citizens and stakeholders to make that vision for greater to be happening in the city of Newport News.
Community bred, community born, community service. That's Vice Mayor of the City of Newport News, Sandra Cherry. Dr. Cherry, for those that want to learn more about your campaign, about your platform, about the work that you have basically dedicated over half of your life to in that community and want to dedicate the rest of your life to the city, where can they go find more information about it?
Thank you for asking. We do have a website, sandracherryformayor.com. We also have our phone number is 757-848-6355. And also you can email us at info@sandracherryformayor.com. We also have social media with Facebook, Instagram as well.
Once again, that is the Vice Mayor of the City of Newport News, Dr. Sandra Cherry, who's dedicated over half her life to the service of the South End District, that now wants to dedicate and bring that same energy, that same focus, that same love and passion for the entire city of Newport News. So Sandra Cherry for mayor, Sandra Cherry community or activist, Sandra Cherry community bred and born. Listen, thank you so much for being here on Stay the Water. Any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you for the invitation again. And on November the 8th, put a cherry on top. Thank you. God bless.
God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, once again, as we continue our series here on our community conversation, we're bringing community organizations, movers and shakers to talk about the impact that they're making. Now with us, we have a phenomenal special guest, someone who is no stranger to the Norfolk State community. That's Minister Gary McCollum, former Senior Vice President for Cox Communications, Virginia, and former Rector of the Norfolk State University Board of Visitors, and former State Senate candidate and founder and president of Do the Right Things, a grassroots activist organization. Minister McCollum, look, thank you so much for being part of Stay in the Water.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Look, it takes about half the show to talk about, all the hats that you've worn, during your phenomenal career. It was great to see you and also my good friend Justin Fairfax, former Lieutenant Governor, here, during the football game here this year. And when I saw you, we talked. I said, listen, I got to have you on the show.
Well, I do appreciate that, and thank you for all you're doing. I listened to the first half of the show with Vice Mayor Gary, and, it reminds me of the scripture, I think it's Proverbs 29:2, that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people moan. And she clearly is doing a great job there, and that's really why we founded our organization, to make sure that we could inform people about voting and that they elections have consequences, and it's their right to vote, and we don't want to give up our voice by not voting. And so thank you again for allowing me to be on the show with you this morning.
Absolutely. And I want to keep that energy going toward the community because, again, as a former executive, Senior Vice President for Cox Communications, Virginia, a Fortune 500 company, and your career, in corporate America and also your involvement in government, you saw fit to say, hey, I want to dedicate my life now to an organization where we simply do the right things. Why leave out of all of the perks of corporate America and say, I want to come back to the community?
Well, I don't think I ever left the community, and I think that's it. I often remind people when I'm talking or just chatting with people that I grew up in a housing project in Richmond. The address was 2375 Ambrose Street, and I remind people of that because that's how I think. I have had much success in my military career and in my business career. But at the same time, I have never forgotten where I came from. And just as Vice Mayor Cherry talked about, there are communities that are marginalized, that have been forgotten. And in my business career and even in my military career, I tried to make sure that I stayed connected to those communities. And that's, again, why we founded this organization. It's do the right things. And I think I mentioned to you, it's not D-O, it's D-U-E.
That's right.
And the reason it's D-U-E is because we're overdue for our governments to do the right thing with regard to all of the people. We live in a great country, but unfortunately it's not a great country for everybody.
Absolutely. Do the Right Things is a grassroots organization established to bring about justice, accountability, transparency, and fairness by police, government, and corporate entities. Tell us about your work on the local level. Well, first of all, why establish Do the Right Things? And then what about your work on the local level? Because you're working on behalf of city workers, just like our first guest dedicated their lives to the community and the city. Why start there?
I think, all politics are local, and it's sad to say that, in Virginia, we have elections every year, and we know how it works, unfortunately. In a presidential year, let's say 2020, we had 75% turnout. But the year before, in 2019, we had a 42% turnout. And again, I believe that our system was designed that way to make sure that those off-year elections and off-year elections, that we don't get the turnout. And so what our organization is trying to do is to make sure that people know that every election is important. They do have consequences. And it's your money, because basically what happens with elections is budgets are prepared at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, and elections determine who's going to get the money and who's not going to get the money, who's going to eat, I'd like to say, who's going to eat and who's not going to eat, or who's going to eat first and who's going to eat last, if there's anything left. And so I try to make sure, particularly with young folks, to let them see that you can't just be afraid of politics. You have to be engaged in it, because everything you do, from student loans to how much you pay for items, all of that is determined by the people who are in elected office.
Absolutely. When you talk about elected office and the citizen, your organization was created, to help the local person. I mean, the people on the grassroots level. What was the catalyst for you creating that organization and saying it's time now to do the right things?
I think the catalyst really was the way we were voting in Virginia Beach. You are aware that for too long, Virginia Beach had a voting system. It was a hybrid system where you ran in a district, but yet the votes were counted across the entire city. And what that basically did, and the courts ruled, and there was legislation put in place to rectify that, but it just ruled that certain communities were marginalized and discriminated against because of that hybrid voting system. And so we wanted to make sure, particularly in this year's election, that people were aware of the historic nature of this race. This race this year is the first time in Virginia Beach where it's district-only voting. And therefore, there's a great opportunity to change the leadership. The leadership in Virginia Beach for too long has been leadership that I believe has favored moneyed interests at the expense of those who, frankly, do the work. And you mentioned earlier about government workers, sanitation workers. And I think it's telling that as a minister, our organization is standing up for collective bargaining in 2022 when Dr. Martin Luther King was doing this in the 60s. And we've come full circle saying that these folks who take out trash, deal with all kinds of unsafe environments, they're having a hard time to just make $15 an hour. That's what we're talking about.
When you talk about that the voting system in Virginia Beach, I gotta give a shout out to Norfolk State University alum Latasha Holloway, which when we talk about the people on the grassroots level, if you take a look at the lawsuit, Latasha Holloway versus City of Virginia Beach, is about a single mother that took down their discriminatory voting system, and that was the push for the changes in legislation. So when
I think she's a great example of how everyone can make a difference. And I think people, sometimes I'm fond of saying that the most important office any of us can ever hold is the office of citizen. And I think in in her case, she said enough is enough. Yeah. And she stood up and filed a lawsuit. Most thought that she was going to lose that lawsuit, but it started a conversation that even though we didn't get necessarily the solution in the courts, that case was not appealed on the merits. It was appealed because the city won the appeal because the legislation had already been passed to do away with this illegal voting system. And so, again, one person can make a difference.
Absolutely. Listen, as a former grassroots organizer myself back in my college days, I believe that one person, one knock on the door, one conversation, one person can change the world. And that's that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, part of your change that you started here, under due time for the right things, you started moving and working, like you said, with city workers on the local level. Tell us about some of those things that you've done in the city of Virginia Beach with those local city workers in the local community.
Well, one thing that we've done, because most people don't have time to vet candidates. They just don't. I mean, and if you look at the 8 cities, just look at 8 cities within Hampton Roads, there are approximately 139 candidates that are running for office.
That's
City
right.
Council, school board, the mayoral race in Newport News, 139 candidates. There is no way anyone, even for their own city, go in and do all of that vetting. Our team, we did the vetting. We sent out the interview letters. We held the interviews with these candidates for Virginia Beach. And so what we tried to do, and we're going to be expanding this to other cities as well going forward, but we started in Virginia Beach because it is the largest city in Hampton Roads, and so goes Virginia Beach. It influences a lot what happens in the rest of the 757. But we interviewed all of those candidates, or attempted to. Some of them did not respond, and if they did not respond, obviously we did not endorse them. But the other thing that we did, we created a political action committee where we actually went out and endorsed candidates. So we told citizens in Virginia Beach, we talked to these people, we vetted them on a whole host of issues, from housing to transportation to diversifying our contracting, a whole host of issues. And we believe these are the candidates that you should be voting for. So we've done the work for the citizens of Virginia Beach.
Absolutely. You know, and not only that, but when we talk about vetting those candidates, and a lot of times because individuals don't know, and we talked about midterm elections, you know, they don't vote, you know, and that's a detriment to the community itself. Talk about some of your actions and push to make sure that not just people are informed about the candidates, but to actually get to the polls and vote.
Well, again, our website, www.dotherightthings.org. We are pushing people to go out and vote. Voting has already started, as you know. It started on September 23rd. You have until November 8th to cast that vote. We'd like to push people to get registered prior to the 17th. That is a key date, even though after the 17th you still can register, but it does make some things somewhat complicated after that. But try to get registered. If you're not, get registered. And again, it's all about how money is divided, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell people that elections have consequences, and your community depends on you. People will sit down in all kinds of groups, and you probably heard this, you know, walking around even at homecoming this past weekend, and they'll complain about a lot of things. Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? Well, voting is an opportunity to make a change. That's exactly how it works. And so our organization is trying to connect voting to issues in their community. You wonder why we don't have transportation that helps everybody, why someone has to take, you know, an hour and a half one-way bus trip in order to get to work. Well, that's because of the leadership that we have in place in a city. You have to connect those issues. You wonder why, you know, we have student loan issues. Well, you know, young people don't vote. And so that's why those issues have to be connected to the issue of voting, and that's what our organization tries to do.
Do the Right Things. That's dotherightthings.org. Go to it. Find out what's going on and how to get informed about how you can be a part of this grassroots movement to help create change in our area, in your city, in your community. That's Minister Gary McCollum, former Senior Vice President for Cox Communications, Virginia, former Rector of Norfolk State University Board of Visitors, and former state Senate candidate, and founder and president of this phenomenal organization. Listen, I want to ask you on air, and you're not pressured to give me a yes or a no, but we're going to do our wrap up the election show. Right after the election, November 13th. Will you come back as my special guest to help me wrap up the election?
Absolutely. I would love to. I would absolutely love to. And thank you again for this opportunity to be on today. Just let me know, and I will be back with you after the election.
Listen, it's Stay the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. We hope you enjoyed our community conversation series today with Vice Mayor of Newport News and also former Rector of Norfolk State University Board of Visitors, Gary McCollum. Listen, go out and vote, go out and register, get involved, learn more about your community to make a difference. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. We'll see you next Sunday. God bless.